Everybody, it's Leeroy from Leeroy Gaming, and today I have another guide for you for Vagrus the Riven Realms. And this guide is going to be teaching you how to get started effectively using and focusing on the Mercenary Calling. Now, a lot of people when they start out, especially if they follow the tutorial, are going to go and be a trader, and there's nothing wrong with that, traveling around, trading your spices, etc. But for some people, well, some of us, we want to crush our enemies, we want to have them driven before us. We want to hear the lamentation of the women. And for those people, you need to be a mercenary. If you're interested in being a mercenary, then follow this guide. And to make sure that this goes nice and smooth for you guys, you can see timestamps in the description below. So make sure to utilize that to help you out. Now, if you do enjoy this content, make sure to like, subscribe, smash that notification bell. Really helps my channel grow, and I definitely appreciate that. And finally, drop comments if you have any other questions. I've also been making live videos for YouTube, so you can come and see me play this live if you have any additional questions as well. Alright guys, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started teaching you how to play a mercenary in Vagrus the Riven Realms. Alright guys, now we're going to start with character creation. When it comes to playing a mercenary, there are some stricter rules that I think you need to follow in order to be effective in this role. So when it comes to selecting a race, I highly recommend the human Tarkin above all else. And this is all because you're going to get a special Tarkin awning equipment for free. And one of the things that you're going to notice that you're going to be battling as a mercenary is this constant battle for consumption and minimizing it. So consumption is how many supplies your traveling caravan is going to take up. And you're going to be balancing military forces with how many scouts you have, how many workers you have, how many slaves you have. And so, unfortunately, all that consumes, and as your caravan increases, that supply requirement is going to get higher and higher. And if it gets too high, it's going to be really hard to keep yourself fed. You will definitely get to a point where you buy out all the supplies in the city, have like 3/4 of your inventory be supplies. And then if you get some bad RNG, you could, for example, still starve out in the desert if you do this incorrectly. Therefore, you need to have a delicate balance of the sizes of your caravan. But also, we need as many items that are going to lower the consumption of your various units. And this is a great start because you're going to get minus 25% consumption for workers and then 10% for scouts, fighters, and slaves. And that is definitely going to help out to get started. The +1 persuasion perk and savvy perk is fine, but we're mainly here for the item. Now, when it comes to your background, we definitely want to go adventurer. Thematically it works, but what we care about is +1 resourcefulness. This is going to be huge. It's extremely expensive to increase resourcefulness. A lot of people, I feel like, aren't patient enough to save up the 10 insight and then 12 insight and so forth to get these. But this is very, very powerful when it comes to your combat abilities and some of the other abilities we'll discuss in this guide. So getting a +1 resourcefulness is valued at anywhere between 8 and 10 insight. That's way more valuable than any of these other options. And you're also going to get +1 survival perk, which is not a waste. We are going to be wanting to have a survival maxed out so that we can forage as much as we can as well. Now, obviously, our calling is mercenary. That's the whole goal of this focus. And I want to point out what we really care about here is number 1, we're going to get the command perk. This is going to unlock advanced actions in your crew combat, which is what we're going to be doing the majority of the time once we get kind of jump started. And the standard armament equipment is not bad as well. +1 fighting combat strength to fighters, scouts, and outriders. We're going to have a combination of those throughout the game, so this helps out, and it goes into your arms category. All the other things are nice, but 1 slave, 3 fighters, 1 scout, honestly, that's so cheap to get. And intimidation perk is fine. That's going to help you maintain the discipline and effectiveness of your slave workforce. The actual effectiveness of them is going to be really, really powerful, because if you can get these stats up high enough, eventually they're going to be much, much more productive than your normal workers. And then your ambition doesn't matter, but it kind of makes sense. Mercenaries want to get rich, so that's what I select for that. Now, as far as your perks, in order to survive, there are a couple things you need to max out. First of all, we need to make sure we get our hunting up. So when it comes to hunting, obviously we're going to want hunting, as that increases hunting chance, but also beast lore. And as you level up, you're going to want to be maxing both of these out. Other areas you're going to care about is going to be herb lore to increase your chance of foraging. Survival is going to be another one of that. Those are the very, very obvious ones. Additionally, as you level up, you're going to want to get healer. So, and this is something that you want to get across different characters and as you level up, because you're going to be getting people injured a lot as you go in combat. And being able to get an extra +5 healing base chance is big. Eventually, you're also going to want to get alchemy, but it's only a +2 base healing chance. So it's something that I don't push quite as quickly. Another perk that's going to be really useful for you is going to be Skulker. For yourself and your companions, is going to increase your ambush chance. Ambush chances are great. If you can manage to ambush enemies in crew combat, you're going to get huge bonuses and they're going to get huge debuffs. So this is another thing, as you level up, you're going to want to increase. And then another one that you're going to want to eventually get up. It's not something that I'm going to get at normally at character creation, but engineering. This also increases slave workforce and worker workforce. What that basically means is you're getting more workforce per individual, and that means you can have less workers and less slavers, or rather slaves, in your party. And this is a big, big deal, because every single person requires food for upkeep. And again, we want to keep the size of our caravan smaller, especially for non-military personnel, so the more effective they can be through engineering, for example, and intimidation, the better it's going to be for you long term. Also, notice that when I first create my character, I start by putting 1 point into each of these areas, because you're getting the base effect, but it's only costing you 1 insight, and then everything scales up in cost. So notice like beast lore cost 1, and then it costs 2, and then the final one costs 5. And they're all a little different. Like con, if you were to do this, goes all the way 6. Because you're trying to get your best bang for your buck, it's not bad to increase this. And then I also recommend getting increased authority 2, because as soon as you get to your first major town, you are going to be getting 2 companions joining you, and this lets you get the most out of both of them right away. So this is something you could do right off the bat. You could alternatively also put another point into hunting 2 and beast lore. This is a really, really good combination for you as well. And then just remember, as soon as you get your first 4 points, get those authorities up. You're going to want to get authority up probably to about 3 rather early in the game. And then we're going to be focusing on getting your perks up that we've already talked about here. And then we're going to start dumping resourcefulness, and we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the leadership perks. All right, next I want to talk about leadership perks. And you're going to start the game, because of the choice you make during character creation, on getting command already, which is going to allow you to use resources to unlock advanced actions in crew combat. And I will show you what that looks like and which ones to utilize and which ones not to utilize a little bit later in this video. But we're also going to want to get 2 more rather early. Traverse is going to be a big one, because this allows you to use resourcefulness to turn march points into movement points on the campaign map. And that's important, because basically what it's going to do is going to turn the points that are here, these red ones, that if you utilize normally, is going to have a negative impact on your morale, your vigor, and other factors. And it's going to turn them into normal movement points that you can use without penalty. And there is a cooldown of a couple days when you utilize this ability, but when you're traveling around the map, I will utilize this pretty constantly. The only time I'm not going to use this is when I'm getting close to a quest area where I'm going to do combat, because I want to make sure that I have full resourcefulness ready for combat. You get this back whenever you rest. Like over time, you're going to be getting this back over days, so you don't want to be depleted when you go into big combats. Outside of that, this is going to really help you get around quite a bit more. And then the other one I like to get, and it's an expensive one to use, you actually need 5 resourcefulness to use it, is called Exploit. You can use resourcefulness to reroll available contracts in the settlements. This is really, really big, because if you go here and you look at your different contracts, let's say you're looking at them and you're not finding theoretically anything you want, and you're mainly going to care about the combat ones. Well, you can click this right here and says it costs 5 resourcefulness and you can only use it every 7 days, but you click on it and all of a sudden it's re-rolled them, and maybe now you have ones that are better locations, better rewards, etc. It could also backfire and it could be horrible, and then you can just kind of reload and keep the ones you have. But this is great, and you can choose to reroll either your trade ones or you can reroll your combat missions. So this just helps you out to pick better and more efficient missions. Okay, next I want to talk about mounting mechanics in Outriders. So your fighting power is going to be a combination of the damage you get from your scouts, your fighters, and your Outriders. And your Outriders are a combination of your fighters with your mounts. Now, this is important to keep in mind because there's going to be equipment that we're going to discuss in a second that will also modify the various effectiveness for offense and defense for these units. But the golden rule is this: scouts, fighters, and Outriders will all buff your offense, but it's mainly the Outriders that will buff your defense. So when you're starting out and you don't have any Outriders and you just have scouts, fighters, and Outriders, you may very well have 100, 150 offense, but your defense will be almost non-existent. It'll be like 10 or something. And what that leads to is extremely high casualties. So the secret to minimizing your casualties is to make sure you have a good enough amount of Outriders. Now, do be careful, because if we look at the stats for mounts, for example, they require a good amount of food. So over here, we have 36 mounts, and those require 61 food a day, while your scouts, for example, cost 108. So when you combine those, that's a lot of food that you need. In fact, the majority of our consumption is going to be from our horses combined with our fighters. In addition to requiring food, you're all going to also notice that mounts do require workforce. So you need a combination of either one of the 2 types of workers to maintain them. Now I want to point out an interesting mechanic. Since I am in town, and when I'm normally traveling, you'll notice I do not have my Outriders equipped. Now this is for 2 reasons. Number 1, when you have a mount by itself, it is going to carry 7 cargo. An Outrider only carries 4 cargo. Additionally, when you mount up, your food consumption will actually go up. So take a look at what's happening. Even though we're having the same amount of fighters and mounts, because all you're doing is you're combining them, this number is going to go up. Take a look. Additionally, what you're going to see here is the amount of space you have for equipment is going to drop. So if you keep mounting up, eventually these spots will go away. So take a look at what happens if I keep trying to mount up. It says this action will cause you to have excess cargo that we'll need to get rid of. So you would obviously cancel out. Now, the good news is, right before combat, you will have the opportunity to mount up. And after the combat, a couple of things are going to happen. Number 1, you will not have nearly as much food cargo by the time you get to your destination. So a lot of this will be gone here. And then you may very well gather more beasts of burden or mounts to find yourself room. So it's not going to matter that you mounted up for combat. Also, I don't know if it's a bug or if it's intended to work like this or not, but you can, of course, mount up right when you're about to start combat. You'll start them by showing them separate, but as I'll show you, you're going to be able to mount up right before you get into combat, so you'll get all the offense and defense benefits without having to spend all that extra consumption. Now, I also wanted to mention for you guys that there are different types of beasts. So at the beginning of the game, you get access to 2, and there is a 3rd insectoid type that I personally haven't unlocked yet, but I know it's out there. So you will notice you could theoretically swap over from one type of mount to the other, and they have different strengths and benefits. But for mercenary work, I actually recommend staying with your normal mounts. So the difference is, if you kind of swap over, you'll notice that these little lizard mounts, which is what you mainly care about because we're not going to be using very many beasts of burden. So they have -1 movement, -2 to the forced march. Now, we don't really care about march as much because more often than not, we're going to just be using our normal movement because we do not want to wear out our caravan. If your caravan has low morale, it has low nutrition, low vigor, it will impact your combat stats. So you're not going to be pushing your caravan when you're getting ready for combat very often. Additionally, these lizards also carry less base cargo, and that's bad because the majority of what you're going to have for holding cargo is going to be from your mounts, not from your beast of burden. And finally, to make things worse, is they also take twice as much food. Now, they do have a benefit. They have a +2 to attack each, so instead of 3, it's 5. But what I have found is that my true problem in fighting isn't my offense, it's really my defense a lot of times. Right here, you'll notice, even before I mount up my units, I have over 642 combat strength, which is more than enough to have enough offense to beat other armies. That can make me a lot of money in early and mid game, but it's really the defense that balances out. Now, your beast of burden, you'll notice also, they actually move a little faster than their counterpart. That's more kind of like this oxen format. But they, again, less force march. We don't care about that as much. It does have more capacity, which is great, and more defense, +1. But they also cost almost twice as much. So 75% more, I believe. So it's just not worth the swap, what I found, for mercenary lifestyle. So I wanted to point that out there. All right, next I want to talk to you about a goal size for your caravan and kind of that early game as you kind of want to break out and start making some real good money. So in order for me to make roughly my first 1,000 bras, which actually didn't take that long overall, I kind of aimed for this ratio I have here. So I have roughly 20 slaves, I have 5 workers, 25 scouts, and they're going to be important because remember, scouts are going to give you combat bonuses, but they're also going to be providing you all your hunting ability, which is huge. And even though we don't use scouting very often, when we do, it is utilized via scouts. So they have 3 very important jobs for us. Now for fighters, you do gotta find a nice balance. I chose 25. Now there's a reason why I chose 25 and 25 for scouts and fighters. Number 1, we have to keep our food consumption relatively low. 184, so between 184 200 is about as high as I want to get it, because this means that each stack of 250 supplies is going to last you like 1.25 days. And when we go and hunt, it is reasonable to be able to find between 1 and 200 average supplies pretty easily. You can get 300, 400, 500, etc., but you don't want to get to a point where your supply requirements are like 300 or 400, and all of a sudden, if you have a couple bad rolls when you're hunting, you're starting to starve. The other reason is that there is a soft cap of how many weaponized units you can have going to towns. And basically, once you hit 60 armed units, when you try and go into town, the guards will basically tell you, nope, you can't come in here. And you're going to have to buy a license. And this license is not cheap. The cheapest rate you can get for it is paying for a year in advance. And it's going to cost you 150 bras. That's the silver amount. So early on, that's expensive. So you do not want this to grow too much. Now, additionally, I like to have enough horses to fully mount up all my fighters. And I like to have a little surplus for carrying capacity, but also in case any of the mounts die. You will also be getting a lot of mounts through combat, as you'll see in just a little bit, but this is a really, really nice low ratio. You can have 5 more, you can have 10 more. Don't go overboard because, again, they do consume resources, and they're not going to provide you that much more benefits when you are just riding around. And then finally, Beasts of Burden. I only take one with me initially when we're at this size. When we grow a little bigger, you're going to go up to 2 Beasts of Burden. Again, they don't provide any military benefits. They do have a workforce requirement. They require a lot of food. And at the end of the day, early on, you're not going to be carrying that much stuff. There's only so much food that the cities have that you're going to buy. We're not going to be trading that much. We're basically just going to be looting and getting a bunch of items from the combats, as you'll see, taking it back and selling everything off. Okay, next we're going to talk about recommended items. So first of all, you already know, if you started this with the characterization guide, that you're going to have the Tarkian awning. This is going to again help us with that consumption decrease. Now, some of these other items are going to be based on the deputies we have, and we'll discuss that in a second, because you're not going to have them unlocked right off the bat. But as soon as you do, for one of these animal spots, you're going to want hunting animals. This is going to give you a +10 hunting base chance. That is huge. It's going to give you a +8 chase, and basically when we get into combat and enemies start running away, our chase stat will dictate how effective we are at running them down and killing them so that they don't get away from us. And then a +8 combat strength that does not hurt at all. So this is a really, really good animal. Now for our defensive item, I like getting Protected Harness. This is going to lower the consumption of Beasts of Burden by 10%. We're not going to have a ton of Beasts of Burden. We're going to have 1, eventually 2, maybe 3. So this is going to lower the consumption because they each cost 12 consumption. The +5 flee should hopefully never be needed, because you're going to be a monster when it comes to killing stuff and fighting, and we're going to be fighting, not fleeing. But then we have the following stats that are huge. You're going to get +2 mount defense, +2 outrider defense, and +2 beast defense. And this is huge. Remember, as I mentioned earlier in this video, you're going to be able to get your offensive stats up really easily, but it's getting our defense up that's going to be problematic. Your mounts / outriders have a base defense of 3, coming from the mounts rather. So this will basically almost double that, going from 3 to 5. So that is huge. And this is what's going to help you stay alive and nice and tough. So this is the first one I recommend getting. For the arms category, you're going to be able to throw in standard armaments, and you already get this for starting with the mercenary background. This gives you +1 fighting combat strength for fighters, scouts, and outriders. So all 3 types of offensive units you're going to have. This is going to help a lot, because if you think about it, if you have a total of 50 or 60 units early on, that's an extra 50 to 60 strength. And as your forces increase in size, it's just going to keep getting higher and higher. Now for your first miscellaneous spot, I recommend blinders and combat saddles. Now notice this goes in miscellaneous, harness, or offense, but we don't have offense unlocked yet, for example, and we already have harnesses picking up. But this is amazing because it's going to give you +10 chase, as we discussed. This makes it so you can run down enemies that are running away more easily. +1 outrider combat strength, that's huge, and +1 outrider defense. So now between this and the protected harnesses, our outriders now, instead of providing 3 defense each, they now provide 6. And so that is a huge difference. You'll notice the stat increases when we mount up our units in the combat section, but this is one you want to get. And then another sorcery item that you're going to be able to get, and this is going to be a reputation reward, is Sergorod's Blessed Idol. And this comes from one of the reputations from the factions, and it's a Church of Sergorod. We'll discuss this when we talk about factions in just a moment, but this is really powerful. It lowers the enemy combat strength by 10%, and that can mean the difference between winning and losing. So this is a nice little one that you're going to get for free once you unlock the proper tier of their reputation. And then when it comes to your cargo spot, I use hidden compartment. I don't know why these got put in here, but normally I'll have 1 or 2 items that are contraband, like this dragon steel scraps. I like to keep it in here so I don't have to worry about it when I go into town. Or you could just get extra storage if you don't carry any contraband. And this is just going to give you +7 beast cargo. So this helps a little bit. It's not going to game change you because you're not going to have that many beasts of burden, but this will help out. Now next we'll talk about deputies and the companions that you need. So probably the most helpful companion that you can get is going to be this lady right here, Krifta. I like her because you can get hunting with her, you can get beast lore, survival, skulking. All of these are very helpful. You're going to be able to use her in combat as well, which is wonderful. And then when it comes to her deputy roles, she actually has 2 that I absolutely love. Now, Scoutmaster isn't bad, but it's also nothing that special because it gives you +1 max movement, which is phenomenal. But what we really want are the benefits from the 2 other options. Now, you can't have them both from one person. Eventually, I'd like to have companions to cover both. But the most important one is going to be Chief Handler. We already discussed the importance of consumption reductions. This is going to lower the consumption of beasts of burden, of your mounts, of your mount workforce needed, which is huge, your beast workforce needed, fleece, fine, lure away, you're going to never use. Also, it's going to open up an animal equipment slot, which is very important, and your Outriders are going to consume 10% less, and your Outrider workforce needs are going to be dropped by -20%. So this is ridiculous. You do need to make sure that you pick up Healer and Beast Lore on her. Again, Healer is great as well, so it doesn't hurt to pick this up on her. So that's a phenomenal mode. You could also choose to use her as a Venatorus. And again, I'd like to get a second companion to put this on. This is +10 hunting base chance, huge. +5 foraging base chance, which is nice. And again, it can open up a second animal slot. So if you get both of those, you would get the second animal slot. And there are some good animals even early on. I actually like guard animals. This increases vigilance. And vigilance is a stat that is basically your defense against ambush. So there's nothing worse in crew combat than getting ambushed, because your stats are way nerfed and you're gonna take casualties, and sometimes a lot. So having guard animals early on is gonna be really useful. Now next I want to talk about reputations, and this is very important. I feel like for a mercenary, because you have a bit of an uphill battle, you want to centralize yourself early on in the game, have a really efficient route of doing missions, and having a strong home base. And there's no better early game home base than Torzag Shelter. Now, this is important because it is a major spot of missions for the Church of Sergorod. They are close friends and allies with the Church of Ashkul, and they also get along quite well with the House Darius. So this kind of trifecta are going to be the 3 main houses I recommend you focus on. House Darius doesn't have nearly as many missions coming from the early entry area. In fact, if we look at the menu, the map, I'm gonna point out, here's Torzag Shelter. You're gonna be able to get missions from here for the church, and there's gonna be combat heading up north towards Arkan, towards Lumen, up towards Crossroads, etc. All very accessible ways. Down here towards Terrathon Falls, you're gonna have missions for that. So they're gonna be very, very easy to build up. I spent about 90% of my early missions going for them, and it helped out. The other church is going to be also helpful. You get some of their missions when you go to Lumen, when you get to Arkan. Darius is going to have missions when you go west here, towards like Fort Viridium, the Crystal Town. They also have missions for them, but this is kind of a pain to get to. Now, House Darius is going to have most of their missions up here. I call this Slaver Lane because here is Ash, Sunrock, and the Devon are kind of the quote-unquote early to mid-game kind of areas for those missions. But what I don't like about this area is that Devon has the cheap supplies at the 1 cost ratio, but Sunrock and Ash, it's more expensive, and or they have worse cost ratios. And the worst part of having to go into Ash, which is basically the slaver central place and the home base of the House Darius, is this whole Ashen area. You cannot salvage here, you cannot forage here. You can hunt, but you cannot forage. So one of your 2 ways of getting supplies is kind of nerfed. So I have spent time doing quests here, but it can be a bit rough. They also have you spend a lot of time going down south into this kind of really rough deserty area for a lot of the missions. And I've had sometimes good luck with combat here, and sometimes it's been a little tough to survive with resources. So based on that map, as I mentioned, you're going to have a really easy time building up the Church of Sergorod and then kind of working on these other 2. You are going to really struggle with Loader's Guild and Carpenter's Guild and the Abolitionists, because you are going to have specific missions where you're basically attacking them. So this is not the playstyle for those reps. You're going to be able probably to have better success with Rathnark Alliance and or Scythianus Covenant. I cannot pronounce that. Although there's definitely kind of some tension story-wise with these guys when you're kind of going pro-Imperial, which is basically what we do here. Now, why do we care about this? Well, we care about these reps because as you get higher rep, you're going to get more lucrative missions, and I'll be showing you some of that in a moment. But you're also going to get some great perks. So for perks, if you were to go under the mission section up here and go under rewards, you're going to see all the possible rewards you're going to be able to claim. And the Church of Sergorod has some amazing rewards. So the first thing you're going to get as soon as you get tier 2 is Zealous Anger. Gives you a +5 combat strength. So this is a multiplier, which is great. You're going to get then also a free torture device, which is okay, I guess. Then you're going to get Always Alert, and that's going to give you +15 vigilance. And as I mentioned before, that is your defense against being ambushed. Then you're going to get a Talisman of Divine Rage, also at that same tier. Then at tier 4, which I got more recently, Ever Vigilant. So this replaces Always Alert, and you get a +30 to vigilance. Again, once you get this point, you're almost never getting ambushed, which is great. And you're also going to get this Sergorod's Blessed Idol, and this is what I have equipped here, and that's really, really nice. And then finally at tier 5, you are going to upgrade your Zealous Anger to Zealous Rage, and once you get that, you're going to get +10 combat strength instead of, or 10% instead of 5%, and that's again really, really nice. So very, very pro mercenary buffs. And of course you can look at all the other reputations as well, like the Church of Ashkul is going to give you combat against undead, which is nice, and various different items, etc. But for beginners, this is the one you're going to get, and you're going to be able to get it up really, really quick. Now, there are 2 additional benefits. Now, for example, when you're in Torzag Shelter, you can go to the Temple District, and there's also other parts around the world where you're going to find Temple Districts. If you go to the Cathedral of Sergorod, you can talk and select see what services do the priest offer. and you can get 2 different buffs. And the one I like is ask Sergorod to grant you power against your enemies. So you can basically debuff your enemies or buff yourself. So when you talk to the priest, you can ask him to curse your enemies. And so this is kind of a debuff against people that have wronged you. I've yet to be able to utilize this. If you click on it, it'll tell you there's like nobody here so far. So maybe if somebody screws you over, you can utilize this, but you can do the second option. And this is amazing. So you're going to be able to either spend money or your reputation with them, or you could sacrifice either supplies or one of your horses, for example, to get this buff. I recommend just pay the money because it's not that expensive. It's like, well, early on it may seem expensive. Eventually, 1 brass is nothing. And when you get this buff, you're going to notice it lasts for 12 days. And I may already have had it when I selected it. But if you go here, you'll notice I have Greater Blessing of Sergorod. It's baseline 12 days, and it looks like it does stack. So I think I had 2 days left, and now it's to 14. And when you have this buff, it's going to give your crew stamina, vigor, and buffs to your combat. So when you mouse over this, you're going to notice right here, this gave me a 10% combat stat boost. So this is phenomenal in making sure that your units kind of go nutter butter on the enemies, and it's not that expensive. So when you're going out to have some major combat, you want to get that buff up. And then there's a final benefit that I absolutely love. So I'm normally not a huge fan of traveling on roads, but sometimes when I'm in a rush or I have maxed out resources, I will go on the roads because they're efficient. They only cost 2. But the real annoying thing is that sometimes you'll travel and you're gonna run into a toll collector. I was kind of hoping to proc one right there. I didn't. But they're gonna ask you to pay money. And sometimes it's a lot. I've had like 5 brass or more. I think once it was like 15. I don't know if they scale it based off how much money you have or how many goods you have. But bottom line, it can be really expensive. And if you don't want to mess up your reputation with them, you normally have to pay it. But if you have a good reputation of the church, you have to have tier 3 reputation. When you do, you have an option to talk to them, say, hey, I'm protected by the church. I ain't paying you anything. And there's no repercussions, no negative debuff I saw from it. And you basically get free tolls. I don't know if it's in every corner of the world, but at least in all these beginner and intermediate areas. So everywhere here that you start the game out, that you are likely to do quests around here, I had no issues with it. So that's a nice little benefit of being friendly with the church. Now, before you head out on missions, there's one other area you want to make sure that you visit in Torzag Shelter, and continually come here as probably your primary source for medkits. So if you go to the civics district, you can visit the infirmary, and here you can buy medical supplies. I just like to buy a lot of medical supplies. Is going to give you 10 of them. It does cost you a decent amount, but it's not going to be much in the long term. It's roughly 2 bras for 10 of them. And I like to make sure I always have 40 to 50 plus, because sometimes you can lose track of it. This is really important because these medkits are used to not only heal up your companions from combat, but also all your units. And if you have no medkits, your companions will heal up extremely slowly. And what's worse is your actual horses, your scouts, your fighters will just insta-die, which will be absolutely horrible. So make sure you have lots of medkits. Just stockpile them. They don't take up any weight in your caravan, so all that matters is your money. That's your only limitation on it. Have at least 40 or 50 with you. If you don't visit the major towns as often, stockpile more. Do note that you can find them in most settlements. Oftentimes they'll be in limited supply, or you have to buy them one at a time, which takes forever. This is why I like this major town. You can go to infirmary and buy 10 at a time, click it 5 or 10 times, buy 50 to 100 of it, and you're good to go. Now next I want to talk to you about looking at your caravan size, comparing it, your comparing your consumption to your potential for how much you can hunt and also forage out when you're traveling. So what you're seeing here is the size of my caravan for kind of tier 2 of advancement. By that I mean it's no longer super early game. I have now bought a license that lets me have over 60 armed forces. And so I have kind of scaled up. If you saw early in the video, I had actually less workers and slaves. Now this is a previous save. So I do want to point out that I have since then edited this down to lower the amount of workers and increased the slaves quite a bit because I'm just getting more efficiency out of them. They take less food and they're more productive. So that is one thing that's different. But my scouts are going to, in this case, are now about 34. My fighters are about 50, and you'll notice that I have about 30 mounts. Normally, I'm going to have kind of like, I want to make sure they're covered, and then I have anywhere between 5 or 10 extra mounts in early game, and then now I have a little bit more because I'm using them for transporting. I am utilizing one extra beast of burden because I had recently won a combat and had extra, and I was doing some transportation. But normally I will keep about 2 beasts of burden at this size. And the key here is that my consumption is about 282. Now, if we can increase our slaves to about 20 and lower our workers some, we really don't want this much higher than 250. That's our magic number, because let's take a look what happens when we're traveling. So here I am traveling, and I go into my hunting and foraging, and notice I have a 46% chance of a positive effect plus 12% chance of a critical good effect. That's 58% chance of having a positive scavenge or hunt rather, and that's going to give me between 0 and 649 food or supplies. Now this is big. Notice that I mentioned I didn't want my supply requirement per day to be any more than 250. That's because I want to make sure that my maximum amount of hunting is at least 2 times what I use. In a perfect world, it would be 3 times. In addition, we're also gonna be foraging. This one, the chances aren't as high, but you might as well utilize it when you are hunting because it doesn't cost anything extra. And so here you notice an extra 0 to 150. This is a bit of a safety net. This is a bonus when it procs. I count more on the hunting procking. Let's take a look what the results look like. So here is an example of a good success. This isn't a critical success, but it is a success. And you notice combined we have about 500 food. This is enough to cover for 2 days of food. And I'm going to show you a couple other examples right now back to back. So here again, success failure also around 500. When you get critical successes, again, obviously at my current size, you can get that closer to 600, 700, and foraging can increase. So I want to point out that the amount of scouts you have will dictate the potential amount of supplies you will hunt and bring back. Your percentage chance is all about the combination of your different perks and also the equipment that we put on our caravan that boosts the chance of success. Same exact goes with your foraging. So keep that in mind here. I could, for example, statistically right now, get rid of some scouts, but the reason I like to have a bigger amount of scouts is that they tend to die in combat quite a bit. So because I tend to lose them more often, I like to have a little extra surplus. What you don't want is having the bare minimum amount of scouts. They die in combat, and all of a sudden you don't have any scouts left. Now that does bring me to the butcher feature that I want to mention. So if you are in an unfortunate situation that you're not in the middle of nowhere, you're getting horrible RNG with your hunting and your foraging, and you're about to starve, you have 0 days of food left, last thing you want to do is not feed your caravan. You will die, you will lose. I don't even like going 50% rations unless I'm super desperate. This is where butchering your mount and beast of burdens come into play. Now remember I mentioned that I like having extra mounts along? Well, that's because not only can they sometimes die, not only do they also provide additional carrying capacity, but you can also butcher them. So if you take a look here, for each of your mounts, it's an extra 82 to 88 supplies. So granted, you do have to sacrifice 3 for an extra 247 to 264 supplies, but sometimes you got to do that, and you can do that day by day. Also, you can also butcher a beast of burden, and obviously these do a lot more. It's 440 to 550 each. So if you're desperate, you can do that as well. All right, next I want to talk to you about these combat missions and how combat works, and also show you how you can get really rich. Now, because I wanted to show you something that was challenging for my character, or my caravan rather, I have gone ahead and loaded up and fast forwarded to a mission. This is a tier 4 mission. Now this mission has me complete 3 battles, average difficulty of 347, and I kind of wanted to show you what battles of kind of equal difficulty are going to be like. Now obviously this scales down, so if you are fighting a lower tier battle and related mission, but you have a weaker military, well, you're going to probably have similar difficulty level. Now I do want to point out that even with the lower missions, you're going to get tremendous resources and loots that you're going to be able to sell off. In fact, it seems like that the baseline amount of kind of money you're going to get as a reward increases, but the secondary loot you're going to get from defeating the enemy that you can sell is going to be really, really good even early on. And this is how you're going to make a lot of your money, and it's the secret why mercenary work is really, really good. So let me show you how we take care of all of this. So here we are. Now do note on this mission, it's a little harder to find. The combat can be anywhere in the circle. Now, a lot of times it is near the center, but what I normally do is if I get towards the center and I don't find it immediately, I use scouting. And so let me kind of, in case you're not used to scouting, you can click this little scout icon, and I will kind of pick 2 options at a time more often than not, because if you use more than 2 of these options, you're going to notice that it's going to cost resourcefulness, which I do not want to utilize. I need that for combat. So we'll go ahead and say, okay, let's take a look on this day. Let's check 4 and let's check 1. Notice the second that I hit the third one adds more resourcefulness. Now I know my mug here is blocking this, but what you don't see here that this uses 1 movement point, and we have a really good chance of finding out what's going on. And then there's a button here that I'm kind of hiding. This says Send Scouts. We're going to click that. We check the results here, and this one we definitely know there's nothing going on here. Now this sounds odd, but normally when I have a really high chance of like 90% chance of succeeding and it fails, almost every single time when I go to the area that I don't see we get a failure, I go and check it out, and that's where I need to go. Coincidence, but let's take a look. Yep, there it goes. So here's the elimination mission. Let's go ahead and activate it. Now you're going to notice our odds are now high instead of the normal very high. Also, you're going to notice that our defense is low because we have not mounted up our units yet, and we're going to go ahead and do that. You have an option to enslave or to kill. The big difference here is when you enslave, you're going to get literal slaves, but you may also have a chance to conscript enemies. Also, some of your companions may not like this. So killing individuals a lot of times may give you a little better rep, but let me kind of show you the full range of options, since you get an extra option when you choose to enslave versus killing. You just literally kill all the enemies. So let's see what that looks like. Again, we're going to go ahead and mount up all of our Outriders. And right off the bat, you notice we go from 5 defense to 155. Huge, huge buff. Notice here we are not capped. So I have found that you can get up to roughly a 96% positive chance from my experience. So you can get this like 18 or 80 something and in the mid-teens there. So in a case like this, we still have opportunities for improving this ratio. If this was much lower, we would go with some of the more defensive options. Now do note, because we are attacking, you cannot do the barricades to increase the defense, unfortunately. So normally I go with flank or flanking assault. I do want to point out that there are also a couple charge options. The basic charge I do not like. It has a low requirement. It does really good offensive buffs, but also has really bad negative buffs. So I never do normal charge. However, I do want to point out that there is an elite option called cavalry charge. And this is the first tier of it. This requires 20 Outriders and 10 fighting crew. And it gives you Outrider combat, chase, and it lowers their morale, which is what grit is, making them more likely to run away, and then you have an easier time running them down. But there is one more. Now, if you have mounts, you can also do mounted charge as a basic offense, which is going to give you similar plus 20 chase now. It's not going to increase the damage, but it's going to increase your Outrider combat strength and make it more likely that they run away, which is not bad as an offensive option if you have really good odds and you want to make sure you run down enemies. And the ultimate option for kind of charging is an advanced command, and it's called Cavalry Charge. This has all the benefits of normal charging without negatives. So it's going to have 5 Outrider combat, plus 30 chase now, and minus 25 grit. So it is a better version of the mounted charge. It just costs more, and obviously it's an advanced action. But we will go ahead and do the flanking assault. And when we activate this, take a look right off the bat. Now it's a 16% chance of the critical positive failure or critical positive effect. Plus 30 damage, and again, you're not going to have a bonus to chase them down, but you are more likely to break them. And this is important because you will take less casualties if you can defeat them in the first round and then you're just chasing them down. So let's go ahead and get started here. And you'll notice the little shaking. The shaking means, you know, they're being kind of pushed here. So we're doing a lot less shaking as they are. We did lose 2 mounted units here, but they're taking way more casualties. The little chains mean you're enslaving them. So they're not doing really good. They're more likely to be running away in round 2 here in a second. But we'll find out in just a moment. And sure enough, they are fleeing. They're organized. They're trying to run away. And we're going to go ahead and pursue. And do note, you can still take damage. We just had more losses there than on the attack. Our unit got injured here. We lost 4 here, 4 here. So it can be risky, but we did basically kill or catch every single one of them. And that is the optimal situation here. Don't worry about these losses because we're going to heal some of these and we're about to get some dividends. So whenever you can, give them time. This is going to increase. Take a look. Right now we have a 35 plus 12, 47% chance of healing to certain degrees. Now it's increased quite a bit to 40, 50, 57% chance. Also, you need to make sure you have medkits. We have 19. I need to actually get more of those. If you don't have any medkits, you can't heal any of them and they're just all going to die. So click heal and let's take a look at the results. Okay, this doesn't mean they all healed up. It just means those types healed up. You'll see exactly how many we lost in a moment. But we definitely healed up some and we're not going to lose as much. In fact, this character is just, the companion is hurt. This one, and we only lost each one of these. Now, what did we get from this victory? Some good stuff. We actually got 12 horses, 12 beasts of burden, we got 29 slaves, and this right here is gonna be a ton of money because we're gonna sell all of this. And then you have these other resources that we're probably not even gonna have room for all of it. So we're gonna go ahead and move on. Yeah, as we can see here. Now, you can only sell the kind of illegal contraband in some areas like bogwheat. So I normally will swap this out. Like I'll pick up the wine and sell it. So the game will automatically just evaluate average costs and try and dump down the least valuable items from what I found. but it's not perfect, especially when it comes to assessing contraband. So that was just one fight right there. And then it says victory is yours, as are its spoils, but is it over? So more fights await me, right? So we have to rest up. Make sure you click up here to toggle medical supplies to recover. Now there's going to be 2 more fights. However, you notice we're totally filled up. You can take a look at the mission and see how many days you have left. You have 25 more days. So we already, unfortunately, didn't make like the early bird special. But as long as we're not late, we're not going to have any penalties. We're still going to get 15 rep. If we were able to get it done in 24 days, we get 30 rep. What we mainly care is we don't want to be late. We definitely don't want to fail. So what you can do here is that we can exit here. And you'll notice we actually have a city that's relatively close. So what we can do in this case is attempt to, I say attempt to because you could totally run into another fight here in a second, but we can attempt to exit. And while I'm recording this live, this event popped up. So you may have noticed that I mentioned how choosing the slaver option is not going to make you very popular among some of your fellow companions, including our little spellweaver friend here. And so she has some text that says, hey, I don't like what you're doing. So same with Gorgoro isn't a huge fan of it. So do be careful of that. The various companions will like or dislike certain things. If you don't want to lose her, you can't really slave at all. Again, this isn't my main load, so I wouldn't do that. You can still do combat for the most part, but just stay away from the slaving. Also, if you do stuff against her faction, she could not like that as well. I don't know what other hidden factors there are when we calculate this, but just keep that in mind. This is the warning that she gives you. All right, so we ran back to this town to show you an example of how valuable these missions are. So even though my mission itself, if we take a look at it, once we complete it, we're going to receive 101 brass. This is only a small portion of what you're going to make off these. So remember, we have 3 combats we have to do to complete this, and we're going to be able to go back, for example, and get it. But let's see what we get already. So the first thing we can do is, normally you're going to get a bunch of slaves, and I don't remember if, I believe we did get some here, but we also got a bunch of mounts. I think it was like 12, and also beasts of burden. So let's just sell 12 mounts, 2 of the beasts of burden we got, and all the resources. And let's see how much profit we make, not even worrying about if we have the best sales ratios here. So we're starting at 1107, and let's sell some of these aspects. So of the beasts, we're just selling 2 of the beasts of, oh, actually we can't do that first. Let's sell the cargo. And I'm literally just gonna sell everything here except for the food, because we didn't have any of this before we came here. So this is, well, we did have this one item, but nothing else. So we're selling this, and this is just from one of the 3 fights. Pure profits. Since we didn't have to pay for anything, we can't sell this, unfortunately. But we can sell everything else except for these 2 items. Now we can go and sell the Beast of Burden. And again, you can hold on to the mounts if you want. This is how you can buy them, but let's just go for profits because, again, we're going to get a bunch more of these. There we go. And normally you're going to get a bunch of slaves from this if you go slaving. If not, then you're not going to. But take a look at this money. I have 1296. We started at 1107. We got, from one of the 3 fights we need, almost 200 brass. We're gonna go back and do the other fights. If you have enough days, you can literally cycle going there, coming back, and then get the mission. If we were to average 200 each, this one mission will net us 500 brass potentially, or more. I also want to show you another thing. You're gonna also get items like this. What's beautiful about these is they don't appear to take up any inventory space. You get them from the combats, and these sell for various amounts. So these pristine trophies, the jade figurines, bronze statues, you're going to get dozens of these. I normally will save them up and then you can sell them to certain vendors in towns. And this can add up to be hundreds of brass as well. So again, here's an example, like I said, that one mission at this level is going to probably get me at least 500 silver. And at earlier levels, it may not be 500, but even within maybe an hour or two of playing, you may be making 200, 250, even 100 is way more than you traversing up and down. And you're going to be able to make a fortune. So that is the big tactic. This is why, even though everybody's saying, hey, avoid the mercenary life, I'm telling you the opposite. Mercenary life kicks butt. As soon as you get tier 2 unlocks, you're going to be able to start making really, really good money. Do note that even some tier 1 unlocks will do great for you. So here's an example of one we're conquering for the Loaders Guild. If you were of them, it's 108 encounter difficulty. You can do this easily. It pays 37 brass, and then you're going to get all the loot from taking it from your opponents. So that is my complete guide to beginning mercenary work. I know it's really extensive, but I hope you found it helpful. Try it out. Use these tips. Use these tactics. If you come up with other ideas and adjustments, make sure to drop them in the comments. And also, if you want to see me play live, utilizing this playthrough and interacting with me, make sure to check out the announcements on YouTube here. I do live playthroughs, and then they're going to obviously stay on the playlist afterwards. Alright guys, that being said, remember, like, subscribe, leave your comments, smash that notification bell if you want to support this channel and see more of my content. That being said guys, I'll see you guys in the next video.